My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sankaran, Guru Piran Nyo, fellow Nyanis. I want to today speak about, continue Mahan's philosophy on thought. Thought is, we covered close to 5 satsangs on thought. I spoke about what is thought, how thoughts are generated, how the generated thoughts impact us and impact our lives, how to master the thought generating process, how to be aware of it, and how to understand the thought generating process, who generates the thoughts, and ultimately how do we master that which generates the thoughts. So we covered quite extensively Swamiji's teachings and also Swamiji's quotes, and today I'm going to continue further on thoughts. If you see in Mahan's teachings, in Mahan's I Got book, thoughts is given quite extensive description. So that is why we are in part 6. We still have a few more sections to go to understand what thoughts are from the perspective of the I Got philosophy of Jnanavalal Paranjali Mahan. So Mahan started off with thought is the diffusion or permeation of I. I here, he speaks about there are, the big I and the small I. Here he's talking about the big I, which is transcendental to the material reality, but also enables the manifestation of all material consciousness. So here he's talking about the universal identity that is embedded in all of us. And we saw that this is transcendental to space and time and our own 4-dimensional material universe. We covered quite extensively here. For those who are new, who are not familiar with this, we have made close to 38 YouTube clips. So you can follow the discussions there. So today I'm going to go a little bit more deeper on Swamiji's teachings on thought. You would be able to pick that up in his I Got book on thought from pages. If you look at the pages, you will see that from pages 15 right up to pages 19. So as it'll be good if you can read it, and then as we discussed today and coming satsangs, you'll have a better understanding. So here, the thought, Swamiji speaks about the thought, and he speaks about the thought is, when we covered the thought, he spoke about the form, formless form, and formless. And here you're going to see some of the descriptions of the formless form, how from the form you get the formless form and then the formless. So here he gives this quote that he says that, this thought, the fragrance emanating from a flower spreads over a long range. If you see, a flower may be, has got fragrance, and the flower may be located in a particular place, but the fragrance travels many, many miles, and here he's describing that while our body is placed in a particular place, we see that our ability to cognize through, the smell and our senses go far and wide. And interestingly, this phenomena he speaks about, I think the flower we can understand how sometimes at night when we're sitting down, we get a beautiful fragrance of the Malyapu, or the flowers, the rose. From far we can, even though the flower may not be in our garden or may not be close to us, we can get that fragrance. And in that same way, he describes how our consciousness, so when we cognize that smell, which means that our consciousness is able to travel that far to be able to cognize this fragrance. He says our thoughts are also in that same way. It expands. And what is really interesting is it's not just a flower. if you take an atom has, electromagnetic field. While the atom is in particular place, space and time, it also emanates electromagnetic field that goes far and wide. Similarly, if you see the sun has a particular location, but its radiation spreads far and wide. So in that same way, the physical body may be placed in a particular time and place, but what emanates from that physical body or entity can travel far and wide. So we see that flowers have fragrance, atom or molecules have electromagnetic field. The human mind has also a similar type of DNA, which can go far and wide. And here he speaks about a specific type of consciousness, which is essentially smell. So everything in this universe is imprinted with this, location-specific form. There's an experience of formless form, and there is a formless. And with all of us, we too are part and parcel of this universe that emerged from this, I, or the infinite possibilities. I here has many, indivisible, infinite, and this, everything in this universe, including our body, including our mind, including our intellect, everything emanates from it. So, and part of the DNA is that while we have spatial time and place, we also transcend space and time through our consciousness. Why is this really important? And you'll see later on that if you understand this truth, if you understand this reality, you'll see that our mind is far more superior than what we think it is. So here, and another interesting quote by another great saint by the name of Chanakya. He also speaks about the fragrance of a flower spreads only in the direction of the wind. So it's interesting that the flowers that we get is influenced by the wind, the direction it takes. But what he also says here is that the goodness of a person, that means the thought, a good thought of a person spreads in many directions, infinite directions. So it's very interesting that if even the flowers, for that matter, thinking about it very carefully, this quote, when there is no wind, think about this really carefully. What happens to the flower's fragrance? When there is no wind, the flower's fragrance goes in all directions, in every direction, right? But when there is wind, the wind tends to take that fragrance to a particular direction. Our human mind is also in that same way. And there's a very deep meaning in this quote by Chanakya. When the human mind also has fragrance here is, consciousness or, that which gives us an experience. But if our mind is influenced by the material wind, the material experiences, you see that our fragrance or consciousness goes in a particular direction. Whether it's in the positive or whether it's in a different direction, it'll take the direction. So as how the flower's fragrance is influenced by the wind, our thoughts are influenced by our wind of materiality. As how the flower, when there is no wind, the fragrance that's ejected from that flower goes in all directions. In that same way, a person who is goodness here, a person who is a mind that had attained the state of samatva, equanimity, not influenced by the material reality, you see that the mind's thoughts, the mind's, fragrance permeates in that infinite direction. So we see that, we see people like Mahan's. Mahan, although born in India, his knowledge has transcended where he is located. It's gone across the globe, is how the flower's fragrance is in all directions. People in all races, religions, social status, how they are living, the living conditions. Irrespective of that, Mahan took a very universal approach, an approach that is not influenced by his own biology or his own family background, or teachings, or ethnicity, or religious backgrounds, or cultural norms. Had he taken that approach, you'll see that his teaching would have gone in a particular direction. But this Mahan decided to take an approach which is universal, an approach which is not influenced by his material, environment. And as such, you see that his fragrance of this knowledge spread far and wide. People of, many social status and so on. So the question we want to ask is that as long as our mind is biased, have the material wind of, we see that our fragrance or our thoughts move in a particular direction. But when the mind is quiet, when the mind is silent, when the mind is universal, you see that the fragrance just bloom and goes in all directions, influence every facet of our lives. Be it the first fragrance that goes in every facet of our life is not just when we meditate, not just when we feel spiritual, but when we meditate, when we are in the spiritual connectivity, when we are, playing our roles as parents and playing our roles as siblings and, children, and playing our roles in our family, playing our roles in our office environment, playing our roles in, our professional, life, playing our roles in our society, playing our roles as a citizen of a country and the world. We see that, as our circle of, our consciousness expands, you see that our fragrance of influence and our thoughts expands. But when we take our very narrow perspective of, my community or my this, you see that the fragrance take a much more limited way. So this fragrance, the flower in us, is none other than our mind that generates this fragrance. And how long or how wide or the direction it takes very much depends on the DNA of our mind. And this is where, acquiring this knowledge of universality that is taught in this I God philosophy by this great Mahan is very important to ensure that our own, fragrance, our own, experience expands long and wide, transcending, our own spatial, our own biology and time. And this is what this first of how our thought, which is many of us think is limited, can be unlimited and universal. And that requires, introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. The next one he speaks about also is that the power of the human thought is enormous. He says that the diffusive power of man's thoughts over 8,000 crores of miles, I mean, it can travel so far and wide, right? And he says that the speed at which it can travel also is immense. At one moment, you can be somewhere. At one moment, you can be, I'm in Klang in Malaysia. At one moment, I can be in Toronto, in Canada, or Vancouver, or in England, or for that matter, on the sun, experiencing the sun, getting the full consciousness of the sun, or the beginning of the universe, or even transcending that material universe. He says that the human mind is so powerful. It has a power that is, much more far greater than all the forces of nature. So here he speaks about, and here are some of the scientific work that people show that actually the speed of our mind is so powerful. There are works that shows that, we think so instantaneously that, And this was something discussed by Mahan, in the 1940s, before, we could, when science made extreme, leaps in understanding the human mind. So through this meditative process, through meditation, introspection, contemplation, and reflection, Mahan is able to show how it influences our neural connectivity. It fosters closer linkages between our neural connectivity, like highways. For ordinary people, there are gaps. But for those who introspect, contemplate, reflect, and meditate and take deep tapas, the neural connectivity, which you see here, becomes more and more stronger. Ultimately, it seals to become like a highway that enables instantaneous flow of, you know, knowledge which emanates in the form of electrical pulse. So we see that those who practice meditation, their memory becomes solid, as I spoke about in previous satsang. Our concentrative power becomes very strong. Our memory becomes, like a well-organized universal library that not just unlocks our material experiences, but also enables us to unlock the secrets of the universe that is embedded in our memory. And the crest eye, which is very important, that gives us a much more peaceful, calmer, and a more quietude in our mind to enable the neural pathways to become more deeper and more well connected. And we see that that helps us reinforce, the type of thoughts that we generate, the thoughts that shows up in our mind. It is able to analyze, explore, make sense, be aware of it, and become enlightened by it. What is really the thoughts that make our mind shrunken, it puts it away. The thoughts that expand, it deepens and stores in our memory. So we see that as that happens, our memory becomes a powerful library that is able to unleash amazing information when we need, and also amazing knowledge and creativity that enhances, our experience. So Swamiji captures this of the power of the thought if we're able to harness our mind. Then he goes on to speak about, if our mind and if through this introspective, contemplative, reflective, and deep tapas, we're able to build our neural pathway and our connectivity very well. You see that the mind is able to process information, subtle information, all the experiences that we have experienced as a biological being, and also all the information that is embedded through evolution in us. And we see that, as he says, the diffusion of this thought is spread everywhere, which means that not only our experience here, but also as our thoughts, as information is coming from far and wide, the mind is able to process, you see, and the mind is able to at every moment be connected. And you see that the influence, not only accessing that information, more easily from everywhere and putting it together, but also to be able to have that holistic thought that you can then permeate through by your own thoughts, by your own experience, by your own actions. So again, we see he says very clearly that, the thoughts spreads everywhere. Like how you see Mahan's knowledge, even though he has never gone to any university, the knowledge that he was able to put together about the universe, about us, the self, he understood himself transcendental to his own biology. Through his own power of his thoughts, he was able to pass that information to others who also are able to experience this. So you see that he says that, when one understands this, one's own intellectual capacity and capability goes up. And not surprisingly, because after all, what is intellectual capacity and capability? It is to be able to make sense of all our experiences, to be able to enrich our experiences, to be able to intensify our experiences, to be able to be creative and innovative so that we improve our quality of life, both, intellectually, connecting to our spiritual reality, which is transcendental, so that everything that we do in this material world, although it is limited, we are unlimited in our mind. Although our biology may have limitations, but that which is, within the biology is unlimited. Although our body is mortal, that which is within us is immortal. Although our body is perishable, our mind and our intellect and our thoughts are imperishable. So we see that, Swamiji says, now, when you do that, you start transcending your own biology. The mere fact that, Mahan attained Samadhi in 1981, that is close to about 40 years. And yet we are still speaking about the knowledge, the thoughts, the experiences that he has left behind. So this is an example of showing transcendentality. Similarly, many great saints and sages that have passed across this journey thousands of years. Some of them we remember, some of them we celebrate. And again, you see that what makes them transcendental is this universal mind and thoughts that touches everyone at the spiritual level, at the core of the spiritual reality. And that is why we celebrate all of them, through various occasions and functions. And later on, I'll speak about Deepavali too. So here, Swamiji speaks about how this thought, if you're able to harness this mind through this introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation, and the deep tapas, one is able to, intensify the intellectual capacity. Then he goes on to say that, again, you see that as you start meditating intensively and, sitting down quietly, you get glimpses of these experiences while you're in the meditative state. But for those who have intensified this meditation, even while in the waking state, you'd feel that connectedness. While you're engaging in this material world, you still feel connected. You feel this, Swamiji used to say, Summa Irukum Sugam, that beautiful, joyful, blissful feeling while still engaged in this material world. And this is what, that full connectivity is there. The unarvu, the vibration, the cosmic rhythm. So here he says that it may be there are places which man has not seen. He uses the word man here. Man here means mankind. So it includes both men and women, right? So there's no gender specific. So here you have to take it as mankind. So he says that maybe there are places which man has not seen, but there is no place in the universe where his thought does not permeate. And you see that, from the time man started thinking, and he had quiet time to, reflect, introspect, contemplate, reflect, and meditate, he started looking at the skies. They started looking at the skies and they started realizing, wow, though my biology is really small, I can see this immense, expansive universe that is out there, And initially they thought that the expansive universe is out there. But then slowly through this introspection, they realized that the entire universe is manifesting within them. While the eyes are seeing, the entire story is being unraveled within. So he says that while body-wise, you may not be in a particular place, but the thought has gone there. The thought has expanded to that level. The entire symphony of life, the symphony of the universe is being unraveled within the human mind. Anyone who meditates intensively will be able to see. So tonight when you go out and see the sky, realize that, the moon and the stars are not out there. It is within you. So this is what Mahan is asking us to observe. Here he goes on to explain, he says, now he's going to talk about so he's defined what this thought is. Now in this chapter, he talks about the omnipresent state. He says, oh man, you are omnipresent. So he sees that as a perception of touch, sensation, you are all present all over your body. He says, when you have a prick in your leg, suppose you have a thorn, you step on a thorn, immediately the whole body sensation is felt. You see, the sensation of pain immediately is felt across. The mind just, the entire body just goes to that one focal point. In that same way, whether the sensation of pain or the sensation of something that gives us warm or cold or so on. He says that that sensation permeates across the body, right? And in the same way, if we are able to, if the mind is able to touch that universal vibration, that unarvu, and you sit down quietly and you feel that unarvu, you see that that should percolate throughout your body, because that vibration, like how when you have a sensation which is pain, the entire mind and the full experience is there. You see that in that same way, that meditation should enable you to feel that vibration throughout your body, throughout your sensation. So what that means is that when your mind is really focused, think about, suddenly you step on a nail or a thorn, every sensation focuses there. In that same way, when the mind is extremely focused, like a pin drop, like a sharp pin focused, you see that the entire cosmic vibration will, reverberate throughout our body. What that means is that, yes, it happens in our meditation, right? But all our senses are quiet. But here is it that he's telling that while awake, you should also feel that vibration, that cosmic vibration, the cosmic dance. And this is where the mind, while its focus in meditation is one thing, the mind that is focused and connected to the universal force will then, you'll be able to experience that connectedness while you are still engaging this material world. What that makes is that it makes your sight more sharper, you're able to pick up frequencies that others cannot. Your hearing, your sense of touch, your sense of smell, your sense of taste, all that now becomes at a much more subtle and a more expansive. So what you ate yesterday, a simple food, today you eat after this meditative introspective, you see that the taste is much more richer. The same thing, the sceneries that you have seen, you see with the lens of that one universal thought, you see that the scenery is so beautiful. The same thing, hearing, sense of touch and smell. All these you are now experiencing in a much more deeper and a richer way. When he says that, omnipresent means you're getting the full symphony of that universal experience, of that material reality that you're experiencing. So when you experience this, then you start partaking. When your experience is so rich, your engagement in this material world also becomes very rich and deep and very subtle. So I like this beautiful quote by Pierre Teilhard. And he says that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. What that means is that it's a very powerful statement. It says that, we are spiritual beings and we are permeating our spirituality within our human experience. So what that means is that everything that is the human experience is divinized. Every thought, every experience is divinized. That is why this Mahan doesn't say that you should get rid of desires. He says, divinize your desires. When you divinize your desires, you become enlightened by the desires. The desires do not haunt you, nor you get caught up by the desires. You become enlightened and enriched by those desires. So here, I really like this quote that, that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but spiritual beings having a human experience. So he goes on to give examples of that omnipresence. He says, suppose fragrance extended to a radius of 2 miles. When you perceive that fragrance felt by the nose within the radius, you are present everywhere in that area. So we see that, we extend to that radius. And similarly, if that radius expands from 2 miles to 4 miles and you see that expansion takes place. In that same way, you see that this experience, we start off of ourselves, right? And then we expand maybe to our family members, our thoughts. Okay, most people are rather, majority people, think about themselves. So that's to some extent being selfish. And this is part of nature, and nature's built this for survival. But sometimes, through enlightened people transcend that survival nature. You can survive, but with a more intellectual, expansion. So that circle of individuality expands now to family, maybe children, spouse, parents, and most people stay at that level, right? And that's it. They look after themselves and their family. But here you see that there are people that extend beyond their family. They see their colleagues in the office like a family. They see the community that they live in like a family, and it expands. That fragrance expands from that 0 mile to the 2 miles to the 4 miles to the universal mind. And that kind of tells you exactly how the human mind has the capacity to expand through inoculating that, or vaccinating it with that universal vaccine that enables it to expand from that selfishness to selfness, harnessing that self, the inner power, to the selfless, and ultimately the selfless leads to the self-realized state. So here Swamiji is giving an example of how this fragrance expands, 2 miles, but it can go beyond this. He also says, look, so our sensational, as we meditate and intensify our sensations, our sensory perceptions become more subtle, through, our smell. He also speaks that of our hearings, our hearing also becomes more and more subtle and extends beyond the radius. There are things that many people cannot hear, but, those who are practicing meditation would be able to hear very, very subtle things. And so much so that the mind is so quiet that you're able to hear your life force, which is so quiet, yet it is unraveling many secrets. And this is what that introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation is. This is what in the great scriptures of Bhagavad Gita, it says this Bhagavan's Gidam, or this universal rhythm is within all of us. If our mind is refined, our ears will be able to listen to that inner sound. That's why Swamiji said, Unarva Gavadi Pa, and that subtlety is very important. He also goes on to speak about, that as the mind becomes aware of its power and the thinking process, the nurturing the thought and the expansion of the thought, the mind slowly gravitates towards, from a material mind to a more universal mind. And when that happens, its presence in a spatial dimension becomes more and more subtle, that it realizes it is everywhere. You feel you're present everywhere in the universe, and through our perception senses, you see that when our mind is connected, all our sensory perceptions now is, rewired to that connectivity. And it doesn't see only the material spatial dimension, but it sees itself as that universal identity. So you see everything as that one, that you're present. So you're no more a drop in the universe. The universe is a drop of you. So, and this is what Swamiji talks about, that gravitation towards a small I to a big I, a thought that may be very limited to a universal thought. Sandosham.